The grand chamber of Harmony 7 Station floated in the darkness of space, its crystalline walls reflecting the light of 1,000 distant stars. Inside, representatives from 47 different species gathered in a semicircle, their various forms creating a bizarre tapestry of galactic life. Some floated in gravity-neutral fields, others perched on specialized seating, and a few existed as pure energy contained within magnetic bottles. Ambassador Chen Wei stood alone at the center of the chamber, her simple gray suit a stark contrast to the elaborate displays of natural armor, iridescent scales, and bioluminescent organs surrounding her. She was a small woman by human standards, barely 5 feet tall with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her dark eyes moved calmly across the assembled council members, showing neither fear nor aggression. High Curator Velis, a member of the avian trell species, ruffled her silver feathers and consulted the holographic display floating before her. Her species had led the Galactic Council for 3 generations, priding themselves on wisdom and careful deliberation. She studied the biological assessment of humanity, with what could only be described as confusion. Ambassador Chen, Velis began, her voice translated into a melodious, human-compatible frequency. We have reviewed your species application for council membership. I must confess, we find your physiology rather perplexing. Chen smiled politely. In what way, High Curator? Merchant Prince Ixalthor clicked his mandibles together, creating a sound like rattling stones. His insectoid form was covered in thick chitinous plates, each one capable of deflecting most small arms fire. He had been the first to encounter humans during a trade negotiation at a frontier outpost. You have no natural defenses, no armor plating, no venom sacs, no size advantage. Your bones are internal and fragile. You breathe a common oxygen-nitrogen mixture. You are, by all accounts, quite ordinary. And yet, added Council Member Thress, a gelatinous being who communicated through color shifts in his translucent body, you have achieved faster-than-light travel and established 17 colonies across 6 systems. This suggests either remarkable luck or something we are not seeing in your biological profile. Chen clasped her hands behind her back. We prefer to think of it as adaptability, Council Member. My people have always made do with what we have. Velis touched a control and a 3-dimensional image of a human appeared in the center of the chamber. It rotated slowly, highlighting various anatomical features. Soft skin, easily torn. No claws or natural weapons. Your teeth are designed for omnivorous consumption, indicating neither apex predation nor pure herbivore grazing. Your eyes are forward-facing, which suggests predatory evolution, yet your musculature is not optimized for ambush hunting like the Kreeth or pursuit hunting like the Valon. We evolved as endurance hunters, Chen explained. We chase our prey until it collapses from exhaustion. The chamber fell silent for a moment. Xalthor's antennae twitched in what might have been disbelief. That seems terribly inefficient. Perhaps, Chen agreed, but it works. Council Member Dravik, a massive quadruped whose species possessed natural armor thick enough to withstand plasma fire, leaned forward. Your application materials mention a military structure and defense forces. You have asked repeatedly about our conflict resolution protocols. Why? The galaxy has been at peace for 3 generations. The last major war ended before your species even left your homeworld. Chen's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. We believe in being prepared, Council Member. Our history has taught us that peace is precious and must be protected. Protected from what? Velis asked. There are no major threats to Council space. Pirates exist, of course, but they prey only on isolated vessels. The great predator species have all been integrated into the Council, or remain in their designated territories. What exactly do you fear? We don't fear anything specific, High Curator, Chen said carefully. We simply understand that circumstances can change. We would like to know what protocols exist should such changes occur. Thress shifted through several shades of purple, indicating contemplation. There are evacuation procedures, should any significant threat arise. Council worlds are provided with transport capacity to relocate populations to safer systems. This has been sufficient for centuries. And if evacuation isn't possible, Chen asked, or if you choose to defend your homes? The question seemed to puzzle the assembled council members. Velis tilted her head in a very bird-like manner. Why would evacuation not be possible? Space is vast. There is always somewhere to retreat to. Chen opened her mouth to respond, then seemed to think better of it. I understand. Thank you for clarifying. The council deliberated for another hour, discussing humanity's application in what they assumed was privacy. Their translators were turned off, but they failed to notice that Chen's small earpiece continued to feed her a translation of their conversation. They seem harmless enough, Dravik rumbled. Weak certainly, but not aggressive. Their colonies are well managed and they have shown no expansionist tendencies. I remain uncertain, Velis said. There is something in their records I cannot quite understand. They reference thousands of wars and conflicts on their homeworld. But when I review the details, these appear to be internal disputes. They fought each other constantly. Many species have tribal conflicts before achieving unified government, Xalthor observed. It is not unusual. Yes, but the scale... Velis pulled up another display. They have documentation of military strategy dating back 10,000 years. They have refined violence into an art form, and yet they are so physically vulnerable, it makes no sense. Perhaps they are simply survivors, Thress suggested. Not warriors, but clever enough to avoid annihilation. This would explain their emphasis on preparation and defense. Velis looked down at where Chen stood patiently waiting, her posture relaxed but alert. Those forward-facing eyes, the High Curator thought. Predator eyes. But predators of what? Surely not each other. That would be madness. Very well, Velis announced, reactivating the translation field. Ambassador Chen, the Galactic Council grants humanity provisional membership. You will be allocated territory markers for your current colonies and provided with standard trade access. Full membership privileges will be reviewed in 5 standard years. Chen bowed her head respectfully. The people of Earth thank you, High Curator. We look forward to working with all Council species. I have one final question, Velis said. It is personal curiosity more than official inquiry. Your species has a saying that appeared repeatedly in your cultural files. If you want peace, prepare for war. This seems contradictory. Can you explain it? Chen looked up at the avian curator, and for just a moment something ancient flickered in her human eyes. It means, High Curator, that the best way to avoid violence is to be so prepared for it that others choose peace instead. We hope we never need to demonstrate this principle. A curious philosophy, Velis murmured. I suspect you will find the galaxy quite different from your expectations. We have moved beyond such primitive thinking. Perhaps, Chen said softly. I hope you're right. As the ambassador left the chamber, Velis felt an unfamiliar sensation run through her feathers. It was not until later that she would recognize it as the same feeling her prey ancestors must have experienced when they sensed a hunter's gaze upon them. The next morning, priority alerts began flooding into Harmony 7 from the border systems. The Kryn swarm had altered course. They were heading toward Council space, and the nearest settlement in their path was a small human colony called New Stockholm. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within 3 hours of the first detection. Holographic displays filled the chamber with tactical information, all of it colored in shades of red and amber. Velis stood at the center podium, her feathers pressed flat against her body in distress. The Kryn swarm has been confirmed, she announced, her voice lacking its usual melodious quality. Long-range sensors detected their bioships crossing into the outer territories. Current projections put their arrival at the border colonies in 72 standard hours. A wave of panic rippled through the assembled council members. The Kryn swarm was not a myth or ancient history. They were a living nightmare that had consumed 17 civilizations over 3 centuries. The swarm was a hive mind of billions of organisms, flying through space in vast living ships that could adapt to any defense. They did not negotiate. They did not retreat. They simply consumed everything in their path and moved on. Council member Dravik's massive form trembled. Have we issued evacuation orders to all border colonies? Immediately, Velis confirmed. All species have acknowledged and begun emergency protocols. Transport ships are being dispatched to every threatened world. We estimate complete evacuation within 48 hours for most colonies. Most? Thress pulsed orange with concern. Which colonies will not complete evacuation in time? A map appeared in the center of the chamber. Most of the border settlements were marked in blue, indicating successful evacuation status. 3 glowed yellow for delayed evacuation. 1 burned red. New Stockholm, Velis said quietly. The human colony. Xalthor's antennae twitched rapidly. Have they not received the evacuation order? They have received it, Velis replied. They have refused to comply. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of sounds as various species expressed their shock and confusion. Velis raised one wing to restore order. Ambassador Chen has transmitted a formal response, she continued. The humans are not evacuating. They are, in their words, implementing defensive measures. That's insane, Dravik rumbled. Do they not understand what the Kryn swarm is? Nothing has ever stopped them. The only survival is to flee and hope they pass by. A communication request flashed on the main display. It was from Captain Sarah Okonkwo, the commander of the human defense fleet stationed at New Stockholm. Velis hesitated, then accepted the call. The holographic image of a tall, dark-skinned woman in a military uniform appeared. She looked to be in her 40s, with close-cropped hair and the same disturbingly calm expression that Ambassador Chen always wore. High Curator, Captain Okonkwo said with a brief nod. I understand there is concern about our decision not to evacuate. Concern is putting it mildly, Captain, Velis replied. You are condemning 50,000 humans to death. Your colony cannot possibly stand against the Kryn. Perhaps not, Okonkwo acknowledged, but we're going to try anyway. We have 300,000 civilians here, High Curator, not just humans. After you issued the evacuation order, refugees from other border colonies started arriving at our ports. Felthian families, Kreeth workers, even some of Exalthor's people who couldn't get transport in time. Then you must evacuate them all, Thress exclaimed. We will send additional ships. They won't arrive in time, Okonkwo said flatly. Your own estimates say that. But here's the thing, council members. These people came to us for help. We don't abandon people who ask us for help. You don't understand, Velis said, hearing the desperation in her own voice. The Kryn cannot be fought. They adapt to every weapon, every strategy. 17 civilizations tried to resist them. All 17 were completely destroyed. Then we'll be the 18th to try, Okonkwo replied. Maybe we'll get lucky. This isn't luck you need. It's a miracle. Your 200 ships against 10,000 Kryn biovessels? Your ground forces against billions of Kryn warriors? It's mathematically impossible. For the first time, Captain Okonkwo smiled. It was not a happy smile. High Curator, humanity has a saying. Impossible just means nobody succeeded yet. We'd like to take a crack at it. I forbid it, Velis said firmly. As High Curator, I order you to evacuate immediately. With respect, High Curator, Okonkwo said, her voice remaining perfectly polite. You're not my commanding officer. My orders come from Earth's Defense Council. They have authorized us to defend New Stockholm and all civilians currently seeking refuge here. We're not asking for your permission. We're informing you of our decision. The connection ended before Velis could respond. The next 48 hours were chaos across the border regions. Thousands of ships fled deeper into Council space, carrying billions of refugees. The Kryn swarm advanced steadily, their vast biological fleet leaving consumed worlds in their wake. And at New Stockholm, the humans prepared. Velis monitored their activities with growing horror and confusion. Instead of packing up and fleeing, human ships were deploying satellite networks. Ground forces were fortifying positions around civilian shelters. The human fleet arranged itself in a defensive formation that made no tactical sense by any standard military doctrine. What are they doing? She asked her military advisor, a veteran Kreeth warrior named Salk. Salk studied the displays, his 4 eyes narrowing. I have no idea, High Curator. Their ship placements leave obvious gaps in their defensive perimeter. Their ground forces are concentrated in small clusters rather than proper defensive lines. It looks like they're trying to lose. Ambassador Chen appeared on Velis's private communication channel. The human woman looked tired but composed. High Curator, I wanted to update you on the situation. Ambassador, please. It's not too late to evacuate. We can still save most of your people. Chen shook her head. Captain Okonkwo has made her decision and Earth supports it. But I wanted you to know that we're not being reckless. We have contingency plans. What kind of contingency plans could possibly work against the Kryn? The kind we're good at, Chen said cryptically. High Curator, I need you to trust us. And I need you to keep recording everything that happens at New Stockholm. Why? Because if we fail, you'll need to know what we tried. And if we succeed, Chen paused, you'll need to understand what humans are truly capable of. The first Kryn scouts entered the New Stockholm system 69 hours after the initial warning. They were small vessels, barely the size of a shuttlecraft, but they moved with predatory grace. They transmitted the standard Kryn intimidation broadcast, a psychic scream that had driven lesser species mad with terror. On New Stockholm, humans felt the psychic assault as a pressure headache and mild nausea. Many took painkillers and continued working. The Kryn scouts swept through the system, cataloging defenses and preparing their hive mind for the main assault. They expected to find abandoned cities and fleeing ships. Instead, they found humans standing on the walls of their settlements, weapons in hand, watching the sky. The scouts transmitted this impossible data back to the Overmind. The response came swiftly. The main swarm accelerated toward New Stockholm, eager to consume this species that had forgotten how to flee. Captain Okonkwo stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UHFS Indomitable. She watched the Kryn approach on her tactical display. 10,000 bioships, each one carrying thousands of warriors. It was the largest Kryn force anyone had seen in 50 years. Her communications officer looked at her with barely concealed fear. "Captain, they'll be in weapons range in 2 hours. Should we say something to them?" Okonkwo considered for a moment, then nodded. "Open a channel. Broadcast on all frequencies." When the channel opened, she spoke clearly and calmly. "Attention, Kryn swarm, you have entered human-protected space. There are civilians here under our protection. You have one opportunity to alter your course and leave this system peacefully." The response from the Kryn was immediate and simple. It was an image transmitted directly into every mind in the system. It showed worlds consumed, civilizations ended, and an unstoppable tide of death. Okonkwo smiled grimly. "Right then. Let's show them what humans do when someone threatens our people." She turned to her tactical officer. "Execute Operation Perseverance. All ships. Begin implementing Phase 1 protocols." Across the New Stockholm system, human vessels began moving into positions that still made no tactical sense to any observer. But to anyone who truly understood human military history, the pattern would have been instantly recognizable. It was called defense in depth, and humanity had been perfecting it for 10,000 years. The Kryn swarm hit the outer defensive perimeter like a tidal wave of flesh and bioengineered fury. Their first wave consisted of 2,000 bioships, each one the size of a cruiser, covered in organic armor that could regenerate damage within minutes. They had crushed fleets 10 times the size of humanity's small defense force. What they encountered instead of terrified prey was something the Kryn Overmind had no experience with. It was a trap. Captain Okonkwo watched from the bridge of the Indomitable as the Kryn ships poured through the gaps in the human defensive line. On every tactical display in the council chambers light years away, it looked like the humans had already lost. The Kryn were supposed to be flowing through weak points in the defense, overwhelming the humans through sheer numbers. Now, Okonkwo said quietly, the gaps in the human formation were not weaknesses, they were kill zones. Hidden weapon platforms that had been running silent suddenly activated. Mines that had been drifting like harmless debris detonated in carefully calculated patterns. The Kryn ships that had rushed through the gaps found themselves surrounded on all sides, caught in a pocket of crossfire from which there was no escape. The first wave of Kryn lost 300 ships in under 2 minutes. On Harmony 7, Velis watched the battle unfold with her wings spread wide in shock. How did they? Those gaps were obvious tactical errors. Every analysis said so. Salk, the Kreeth military advisor, made a rumbling sound deep in his chest. They weren't errors. They were bait. High Curator, I have never seen anything like this. They made the Kryn think they were winning. The Kryn Overmind, processing the unexpected losses through billions of linked minds, did what it had always done. It adapted. The second wave approached more cautiously, probing the human defenses with smaller groups looking for true weaknesses. The humans gave them what they were looking for. A section of the human line appeared to falter. 3 ships broke formation, seeming to retreat in disorder. The Kryn pounced on the opening, sending 500 ships to exploit the breach. The retreating human ships led the Kryn directly into the firing solution of the Indomitable and 12 other heavy cruisers. The ambush was brutal and efficient. The Kryn lost another 200 ships, but the Kryn swarm numbered in the thousands and they learned from every engagement. The third wave came from multiple directions simultaneously, refusing to chase or follow obvious paths. They began to overwhelm the human positions through sheer persistence. Okonkwo studied her tactical board. Her fleet had destroyed 800 Kryn vessels. but she had lost 42 of her own ships. The math was unsustainable. All ships implement Phase 2, begin fighting retreat to planetary orbit. On the surface of New Stockholm, Commander Marcus Torres watched the space battle through his command bunker's display screens. He was a broad-shouldered man with gray threading through his dark hair and scars marking his hands. Around him, 50,000 human marines and 20,000 armed civilians prepared for what came next. The Kryn will make landfall in 30 minutes, his tactical officer reported. Estimates suggest 15 million warriors in the first wave. Torres nodded calmly. And we have 70,000 defenders, which means each of us only needs to kill about 200 Kryn. He activated the general communication channel. All units, this is Commander Torres. I'm not going to lie to you. The odds are terrible. The Kryn have never been beaten in ground combat. They're stronger than us, faster than us, and there are a lot more of them than us. He paused, looking at the camera. But they've never fought humans before. They don't know what we're capable of. They think we're going to break and run like everyone else has. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to show them exactly what happens when you threaten human civilians. We're going to show them what humans do when we're scared and angry and protecting our families. We're going to introduce them to a concept they've never encountered before. Torres smiled grimly. We're going to teach them about close-quarters combat. Remember your training. Short controlled bursts. Fall back to secondary positions when the line gets overrun. Don't try to hold until you're dead. We're not here to die heroically. We're here to kill Kryn until they decide to leave. Let's go to work. The Kryn landing craft were unlike anything else in the galaxy. They were living drop pods that slammed into the earth and split open, disgorging waves of warriors. Each Kryn warrior was a nightmare of biological engineering. 8 feet tall, covered in armored plates with multiple limbs ending in razor-sharp claws. They had no individual identity, only the collective will of the Overmind. They had destroyed armies 100 times larger than the human force waiting for them. The first wave hit the human defensive positions like a flood. The Kryn expected the humans to try to hold their lines, to die in place as so many others had. Instead, the humans fought in a way that confused the Overmind. The forward positions opened fire, killed dozens of Kryn, then retreated to prepared fallback positions before they could be overwhelmed. The Kryn pursued, only to find themselves in another kill zone where pre-positioned weapons and fresh human defenders were waiting. When that position began to fall, the humans retreated again, leading the Kryn deeper into prepared defenses. Each step forward cost the Kryn hundreds of warriors. Each retreat saved human lives while maintaining defensive integrity. It was defense in depth, the same strategy that had stopped countless invasions throughout human history. But the Kryn numbers were overwhelming. Slowly, inevitably, they pushed the humans back toward the civilian shelters. Torres watched his casualty reports climb. 5,000 dead, 8,000, 10,000. The Kryn had lost 50 times that number, but they had 50 times more to lose. In space, Captain Okonkwo's fleet was being slowly destroyed. She was down to 90 ships, and the Kryn had nearly 8,000 remaining. Her tactical officer looked at her with desperation in his eyes. Captain, we have to withdraw. We can't win this, no, Okonkwo said firmly. We can't win by fighting their way. So we stopped fighting their way. She opened a channel to all remaining human ships. All vessels implement Operation Persistence. Let's show them what we're really good at. The human ships stopped trying to fight the Kryn in open combat. Instead, they scattered, breaking into small groups that moved unpredictably through the system. Whenever the Kryn concentrated their forces, the humans avoided them. Whenever the Kryn divided to chase, the humans ambushed isolated groups. It was persistence hunting translated into space combat. The humans were not trying to destroy the entire swarm. They were trying to exhaust them, confuse them, make them waste energy on fruitless pursuits. Most importantly, they were keeping the Kryn space forces occupied and unable to send more reinforcements to the ground. The Overmind had never encountered an enemy that refused to either flee entirely or fight to the last. It did not know how to process an opponent that was simultaneously retreating and attacking, dying and adapting, losing and refusing to accept defeat. On the ground, something even more disturbing was happening. The Kryn warriors had finally pushed deep enough to encounter human marines in close combat. The Overmind discovered that humans were much more dangerous when you got close to them than they had any right to be. A Kryn warrior was faster and stronger than any human, But humans fought with a viciousness that seemed to increase when they were injured. They used weapons at close range that violated every tactical doctrine. Knives, explosives, even their own bodies as weapons. They showed no fear of their own death if they could take Kryn with them. The Overmind felt something it had never experienced in 3 centuries of conquest. It felt uncertain. These small, fragile creatures with no natural weapons were killing Kryn warriors in ratios that should have been impossible. And they were doing it with what appeared to be anger and determination rather than desperation. The battle raged for 72 hours without pause. The humans were losing by every objective measure. They had 30 ships left in space. They had been pushed back to their final defensive positions on the ground. They had lost 20,000 defenders. Any sane species would have surrendered. Instead, Commander Torres activated the contingency plan that had been built into New Stockholm's infrastructure from the very beginning. Every building, every tunnel, every street had been designed with defense in mind. Now those designs activated, hidden firing positions opened in walls. Tunnel systems that had seemed like simple transportation became avenues for rapid redeployment. Buildings that the Kryn had occupied suddenly locked down, trapping thousands of warriors inside structures that became their tombs. The humans had turned their entire colony into a weapon. In space, Captain Okonkwo's remaining ships executed one final maneuver. They stopped running. They stopped fighting. They simply positioned themselves directly between the Kryn fleet and the planet below, and they stopped moving. The message was clear. If you want to send more warriors to the ground, you will have to destroy every single one of these ships first, and we will make you pay for every meter. The Kryn Overmind calculated the odds. It could win, eventually, but the cost would be enormous. These humans had already destroyed 2,000 bioships and killed millions of warriors. If the Overmind committed everything to destroying these last defenders, the swarm would be weakened for years. And for the first time in 3 centuries, the Kryn Overmind asked itself a question it had never considered before. Was this world worth the price? 74 hours after the battle began, the Kryn swarm began to withdraw. The Galactic Council chamber was silent for a full minute after the final transmission from New Stockholm ended. On every display, the impossible had just occurred. The Kryn swarm, undefeated for 300 years, was retreating. Not destroyed, not defeated through superior numbers or technology, simply choosing to leave rather than continue fighting humans. Velis stared at the tactical data with her wings trembling. The humans had lost 23,000 defenders and 158 ships. By any military standard, they had been devastated. But the Kryn had lost over 2,000 vessels and millions of warriors. More importantly, they had lost something they had never lost before: their certainty. I need to understand this, Velis said quietly. Salk, assemble a team of military historians. I want a complete analysis of human combat doctrine, not the summary we reviewed for their council application. Everything. Scholar Tain, a reptilian historian from the Soros Collective, had already begun his research. His species had maintained the galactic archives for 5 generations, and he prided himself on thoroughness. What he discovered about humanity over the next 7 days shook him to his core. He presented his findings to an emergency council session 1 week after the Battle of New Stockholm. The chamber was packed. Every member species had sent their highest-ranking officials. They all wanted to understand what humans truly were. Tain's presentation began with a simple image. Earth, humanity's homeworld. We classified this planet as a standard M-class world during humanity's initial application, he said. This was an error of catastrophic proportions. The image shifted to show Earth's geological data. This world experiences regular tectonic upheavals, severe weather patterns, temperature extremes from -40 to +50 degrees across its surface, and contains thousands of species that evolved to kill and consume other species. It is a death world by our classification standards. We simply fail to recognize it because humans have so thoroughly tamed their environment. Xalthor's mandibles clicked nervously. Humans evolved on a death world? But they have no natural defenses. That's precisely the point, Tain replied. They didn't need natural defenses because they developed artificial ones. Council members, humans have been using tools for warfare for 50,000 years. They have been practicing organized military strategy for 10,000 years. They have written documentation of tactical doctrine dating back to their ancient history. He pulled up an image of an old Earth text. This is called The Art of War, written by a human military philosopher named Sun Tzu approximately 2,500 years ago. It outlines principles of deception, misdirection, and psychological warfare. Every tactic we saw at New Stockholm is documented in texts like this. The display is filled with images from human history, battles fought with primitive weapons on ancient battlefields, naval warfare on Earth's oceans, aerial combat in their atmosphere, armored vehicle warfare across deserts and plains. Humans have fought wars continuously throughout their recorded history, Taine continued. They have fought over territory, resources, religion, political ideology, and sometimes simply because diplomatic solutions failed. They have fought each other in every terrain type on their planet. Underwater, underground, in frozen wastelands, in burning deserts, in dense jungles, and in the depths of space. Velis felt something cold settling in her chest. You're saying they evolved to fight. Not to flee or hide, but to fight. Not exactly, Taine corrected. They evolved to survive. Fighting was one tool among many. But council members, they didn't just develop one type of warfare. They developed thousands of distinct martial traditions. They studied warfare the way we study art or philosophy. They created entire schools of thought about when to fight, how to fight, and most importantly, when not to fight. A new display appeared, showing human biological data. Their physiology reflects this evolutionary path. Humans possess what they call an adrenaline response system. When threatened, their bodies flood with chemicals that increase strength, reduce pain sensation, and enhance reaction time. They can continue fighting with injuries that would incapacitate most species. They also developed endurance unlike any other species we've encountered. Taine continued. A human can run for hours without stopping. They can function on minimal sleep for days. They can survive catastrophic blood loss and continue fighting. Their pain tolerance is remarkable even by Death World standards. Dravik shifted uncomfortably, but they seemed so peaceful during the application process. Ambassador Chen never mentioned any of this. Because we never asked the right questions, Velis said bitterly. We asked about their technology and their social structure. We never asked about their military history because we assumed they would approach warfare the same way we do, as a last resort to be avoided at all costs. Taine nodded. Humans view warfare differently. To them, it is a tool that should be used only when necessary, but when it is necessary, it should be used with complete commitment and strategic precision. They have a saying, if you're going to fight, fight to win. The display shifted again, showing something that made several council members recoil. This is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of human psychology. They have the capacity to compartmentalize violence. They can be peaceful, empathetic, and kind in daily life, then become ruthlessly efficient killers when protecting something they care about. The humans at New Stockholm weren't soldiers by nature. Many of them were farmers, engineers, teachers. But when their civilians were threatened, they became warriors. How is that possible? Thress pulsed yellow with distress. Such a psychological shift should cause permanent damage. For most species, yes, Taine agreed. But humans evolved with this capability. They call it protective aggression. They don't enjoy violence, but they are extraordinarily good at it when they believe it's necessary, and they can return to peaceful behavior afterward without significant psychological damage, though they do experience what they call trauma, which they have developed extensive techniques to process. Ambassador Chen had been standing quietly at the back of the chamber. Now she stepped forward. Scholar Taine's research is accurate. May I address the council? Velis gestured for her to approach. Chen walked to the center of the chamber, and once again every eye was upon her. But now those eyes held fear and uncertainty rather than dismissal. You're all wondering if you made a mistake allowing us into the council, Chen said bluntly. You're wondering if we're a threat to galactic peace. So let me be very clear about what happened at New Stockholm. She gestured to the tactical displays. Captain Okonkwo and Commander Torres did not want to fight. They spent the first 24 hours trying to evacuate as many civilians as possible. When it became clear that evacuation wasn't feasible, they made a choice. They chose to protect the innocent people who had come to them for help, regardless of species. That is what humans do. You killed millions of Kryn, Dravik said. You drove them away through sheer brutality. No, Chen corrected firmly. We drove them away by making the cost of victory too high. We didn't annihilate them. We could have. We had weapons in reserve that we never deployed. We had strategies we never implemented. We showed restraint even while fighting for our survival. She looked around the chamber. You want to know what makes humans dangerous? It's not our capacity for violence. Every species has that capacity. What makes us different is our capacity to choose when to use that violence and when to hold back. We could have pursued the Kryn after they retreated. We could have tried to destroy them completely. Instead, we let them go, because our goal was never to destroy an enemy. It was to protect our people. Salk, who had been silent throughout the presentation, finally spoke. You said you had weapons you didn't deploy. What kind of weapons? Chen's expression was unreadable. The kind we hope we never have to use. The kind we keep as a last resort when every other option has failed. Humans learned long ago that possessing terrible weapons isn't the same as using them. We've had the capacity to destroy our own world for hundreds of years. We chose not to. Why? Velis asked. If you possess such weapons, why show restraint? Because we understand the cost, Chen replied. Every human soldier who fought at New Stockholm knows the price of war. They lost friends. They suffered injuries. They took lives. That weighs on them. We don't view warfare as glorious. We view it as tragic necessity. We fight when we must, but we prefer peace. She paused, letting her words sink in. You wanted to understand what humans are capable of. Now you know. We are capable of terrible violence when protecting those we care about. But we're also capable of mercy, restraint, and the wisdom to know when to fight and when to forgive. The question isn't what we're capable of. The question is, what kind of galaxy do you want? One where strength is feared and avoided? Or one where strength is respected and used to protect those who can't protect themselves? The chamber was silent for a long moment. Finally, Velis spoke. The Kryn sent a communication 3 days ago. It was the first time they have ever attempted diplomatic contact. They want to negotiate a peace treaty. Chen smiled slightly. Then let's negotiate. That's what we wanted all along. But they're terrified of you, Thress observed. They think humans are apex predators that cannot be defeated. Good, Chen said simply. Let them believe that. It means they'll choose peace instead of testing us again. Fear isn't always a bad thing, Council members. Sometimes fear prevents war. And preventing war is always preferable to winning one. 6 months after the Battle of New Stockholm, the Galactic Council convened to address what they now called the human question. The chamber looked the same as it always had, but the atmosphere was completely different. Where once there had been casual confidence, now there was uncertainty. Where once the council members had looked at humans with mild curiosity, now their gazes held something closer to respect mixed with wariness. Velis stood at her podium, her silver feathers immaculate but her eyes showing the weight of recent months. The council has completed its review of humanity's provisional membership. We have also received requests from 17 member species asking for formal military alliances with Earth. 12 species have requested that human military advisors be sent to train their defense forces, and 3 species have filed formal protests, claiming that humanity's presence in the Council threatens galactic peace. She paused, looking directly at Ambassador Chen. Before we proceed to a vote on humanity's status, I believe we should hear from the ambassador. Chen stood and walked to the center of the chamber. She had aged in the past 6 months. There were new lines around her eyes, a heaviness to her movements that had not been there before. 23,000 humans had died at New Stockholm. She carried the weight of those deaths in every step. Thank you, High Curator, she began. I know the Council is uncertain about what humanity's role should be in galactic affairs. Let me address the concerns directly. Yes, humans are effective at warfare. Yes, we possess military capabilities that exceed most Council species. And yes, we are willing to use those capabilities when necessary. But that is not all we are. She gestured to the displays which now showed images of New Stockholm's reconstruction. After the battle, humans didn't celebrate our victory. We mourned our dead. We rebuilt our damaged colony. And we welcomed the refugees who had sheltered with us to stay permanently if they wished. 300,000 non-humans chose to remain on New Stockholm. They could have left once the threat passed, but they stayed because they felt safe there. That's exactly the problem, interjected Council Member Vrix, a floating jellyfish-like being whose species had filed one of the protests. You've created a colony where species feel they need human protection. You're encouraging dependence on your military strength. This undermines the Council's authority. Chen met Vrix's gaze calmly. With respect, Council Member, your species evacuated your colonies at the first sign of danger. My species stayed and fought. The civilians who remain on New Stockholm don't stay because they're dependent on us. They stay because they trust us. There's a difference. A difference that makes you dangerous, Vrix replied. What happens when humans decide their way is better than the Council's way? What happens when you use your military strength to impose your will on the galaxy? That's not who we are, Chen said firmly. But I understand your concern. So let me propose something. Instead of humanity simply being a council member, let us become the council's protectorate. We'll form a defense force that any council species can request assistance from. We'll train allied forces in defensive tactics. We'll respond to threats that endanger civilian populations, but we'll do so under council oversight with clear rules of engagement. The chamber erupted in a mix of excited discussion and concerned objections. Velis raised her wing to restore order. You're proposing that humanity becomes the military arm of the Galactic Council? In a sense, Chen acknowledged. But with restrictions, we won't act without council authorization except in cases of immediate threat to civilian populations. We won't occupy territory or establish military governments. We won't use our position to gain economic or political advantages. We'll serve as defenders, nothing more. Dravik leaned forward. And if the council orders you not to intervene in a situation where you believe you should? Chen was silent for a moment. Then we'll have a difficult conversation about whether our membership in the council still serves both parties' interests. But I hope we never reach that point. We believe in the council's mission of cooperation and peace. We just bring a different perspective on how to maintain that peace. Over the next week, the council debated endlessly. The concerns were legitimate. Humans were the most militarily capable species anyone had encountered. They had demonstrated the ability to defeat threats that had been considered unstoppable. They could adapt to any combat situation with terrifying speed. And most worrying of all, they seemed genuinely willing to die to protect others. That last quality was perhaps the most alien thing about humans. Most species would sacrifice for their own kind. But humans had repeatedly shown they would fight just as hard to protect refugees from other species. It made them unpredictable in ways the Council was not comfortable with. But the reality was undeniable. The galaxy had threats, and the Council's traditional approach of evacuation and avoidance was not always sufficient. The Kryn swarm had proven that, and there were other dangers lurking in unexplored space, other aggressive species that might view the Council as prey. In the end, the vote was closer than Velis had hoped. 29 species voted in favor of humanity's proposal. 15 voted against, 3 abstained. It was enough. The Terran Defense Initiative was formally established with Captain Sarah Okonkwo promoted to admiral and given command. Human military advisors were dispatched to 17 allied worlds, and humanity's status was elevated from provisional member to full member with a specialized role. But the most interesting development came from an unexpected source. 3 weeks after the council vote, a Kryn delegation arrived at Harmony 7. It was the first time the Kryn had sent representatives to any galactic gathering. The delegation consisted of 7 Kryn warriors in containment fields, their hive mind presence carefully shielded to avoid affecting other species. They requested a private meeting with Ambassador Velis insisted on being present, along with Admiral Okonkwo. The meeting took place in a sealed chamber with full security protocols. The Kryn spoke through a translator, their collective voice strange and hollow. We wish to understand mercy, the Kryn said without preamble. At New Stockholm you had opportunities to completely destroy our landing forces. Your orbital weapons could have eliminated our ground troops even if it meant destroying your own cities. You did not. Why? Chen exchanged a glance with Okonkwo before answering. Because destroying you wasn't our goal. Protecting our civilians was our goal. Once you chose to retreat, continuing to kill you would have served no purpose. This is incomprehensible to us, the Kryn replied. We have consumed 17 civilizations. All of them tried to destroy us completely. You had the power to do so and chose not to. The Overmind has spent 6 months attempting to understand this decision. It's called proportional response, Okonkwo said. We use the minimum force necessary to achieve our objectives. You were threatening civilians under our protection, so we stopped you. Once the threat ended, so did our violence. We killed 23,000 of your warriors, the Kryn stated. Do you not seek revenge? No, Chen said simply. We seek peace. Revenge doesn't bring back the dead. It just creates more dead. We've learned that lesson many times throughout our history. The Kryn were silent for a long moment. The Overmind wishes to propose a treaty. We will not enter council space. In exchange, you will teach us about mercy and restraint. We wish to learn to be something other than an endless swarm. Velis felt her feathers rise in shock. You want humans to teach you peace? After 3 centuries of conquest? We want to survive, the Kryn said. We encountered humans and discovered that our way leads only to eventual destruction. If we continue as we are, eventually we will meet a species even more effective at warfare than humans. When that happens, we will be annihilated. Humans showed us that there is another option. We want to understand that option. The treaty negotiations took 3 months. In the end, the Kryn agreed to cease all aggressive actions against Council species and to limit their expansion to uninhabited systems. In exchange, human cultural ambassadors and philosophers would work with the Kryn to help them develop individual identity and ethical frameworks. It was unprecedented. But then again, everything about humanity's introduction to the galaxy had been unprecedented. A year after the Battle of New Stockholm, Velis stood in the observation deck of Harmony 7th, watching ships come and go from the station. Human vessels now moved freely among the galactic traffic. Some carried military personnel on training missions. Others carried diplomats working to strengthen alliances. A few carried scientists and engineers sharing technology and knowledge. Ambassador Chen joined her at the viewport. Thank you for supporting the Terran Defense Initiative, High Curator. I know it wasn't an easy decision. It was necessary, Velis replied. Though I confess I still don't fully understand your species. That's fair, Chen said with a slight smile. We don't always understand ourselves. But I hope you've learned that being good at warfare doesn't mean we want war. If anything, being good at it makes us more aware of how terrible it is. You know what frightens me most about humans? Velis asked. It's not your weapons or your tactics or your willingness to fight. It's your capacity to choose. You have the power to destroy, but you choose to protect. You have the ability to conquer, but you choose to cooperate. That level of self-control in a species so capable of violence, it's both admirable and terrifying. Good, Chen said. Fear can be healthy if it leads to respect rather than hatred. We don't want the galaxy to fear us because they think we'll hurt them. We want them to fear disappointing us because they know we're willing to stand up for what's right. As they stood watching the ships, an alert came through. A new species had just made contact with the Council at the far edge of explored space. Their first communication had been aggressive, making territorial demands and threatening force. Velis started to activate emergency protocols, but Chen placed a gentle hand on her wing. Let me handle this, High Curator. Sometimes the best way to avoid a fight is to make sure the other side understands exactly what they'll be dealing with if they choose violence. Chen opened a communication channel to the new species. Her message was simple and direct. It included a data packet containing human history, footage from the Battle of New Stockholm, and detailed analysis of human military capabilities. At the end, she added a personal message. Welcome to the Galactic Council. We are humans. We serve as the Council's protectorate, defending all member species from external threats. We hope you'll choose to approach us as friends and allies. We prefer peace, cooperation, and mutual prosperity. However, if you choose aggression against any Council species, you should understand exactly what you'll be facing. We've survived 10,000 years of warfare on a death world. We've defeated threats that had destroyed civilizations far older than ours. We've learned to turn violence into an art form, and then we learned to set that art aside in favor of diplomacy. But make no mistake, we remember every lesson we learned. We retain every capability we developed, and we are very, very good at protecting those who cannot protect themselves. The choice is yours. We genuinely hope you choose peace. The response came back within an hour. The new species requested immediate diplomatic talks. Velis looked at Chen with something between awe and resignation. You didn't even have to fire a shot. That's the point, Chen replied. The best warriors are the ones who never have to fight, because everyone knows they could win if they did. Humanity spent 10,000 years learning to be killers. Now we're spending our time learning to use that reputation to prevent killing. It's a better use of our talents. Down in the station's garden, human children played with alien children from a dozen different species. They laughed together, learned together, and grew up knowing that the galaxy was a place where differences were celebrated rather than feared. And watching over them all were human guards who smiled at the children but never stopped scanning for threats. They were warriors who chose peace, killers who chose to protect, and perhaps, Velis thought, that was exactly what the galaxy needed. Humanity had not become the galaxy's most feared killers at New Stockholm. They always had been. The galaxy had simply been fortunate enough never to need them until the moment they did. And when that moment came, humans had proven they were exactly what everyone had feared and more than anyone had hoped. Capable of terrible violence, but even more capable of choosing not to use it.